Welcome. This is God Talk. I am Pastor Dan, and I get to do this with you. We have no way of knowing, of course, who's out there, but you're watching, so you're there. And thank you for being part of my God Talk audience. And we talk about God. And I somehow came across a sermon that I'd forgotten. I did this years ago, I think last year, maybe some other places. I called it Always Yes. I grew up with the idea, and there's a quote that kind of leans this way in Great Controversy, page 485, that if you just have one sin remaining on your record somehow, that would knock you out of the judgment and out of salvation. And I grew up obsessed with that one sin idea. We would have to have a longer discussion to say how to understand that. There was a young juggler that was driving somewhere back east from one show to the next show late at night, and he's speeding, and someone stops him, and they said, "What are you doing?" "Well, I've got to get to my next show, and I'm late, and I got to hurry." And he said, "What do you do?" "I'm a juggler." He said, "If that's really true, show me you can juggle." He said, "I don't have any of my stuff. I shipped it on ahead till the next show." He said, "Could you juggle some flares?" The police had some flares. Sure, I could do that. So they go out, and here's a police car with the lights going, and his car, and he's out here with these flares, and he's juggling the flares. When all of a sudden, another guy pulls up behind, gets out of his truck, gets in the back of the police car, and the police come over, and he said, "What are you doing?" And the guy said, "If that's the test I got to do in order to pass that I'm not drunk, I'm never going to pass that kind of test. Just take me to jail right now." I will never be able to pass that test. How hard is this test that we're going to have to do? I grew up with the idea that any sin that I couldn't get over or had forgotten about would knock me out of heaven. And that every time you messed up, you're out. You eat the wrong thing, don't give enough money, said something secular on Sabbath, didn't do your devotions, you're out. Go through hoops to get back in. Then I heard more Vendans say, "No, it's not just a little mistake here and there. You still have a relationship. Don't lose your relationship over that." But then I heard that it could be your known sin. If you had a known sin, accidental sin, okay, all of a sudden you slip. But if you think about it, plan it, know it's wrong, and you still do it, well, most of the time our known sins are known sins. Does God switch from back and forth, from yes to no and no to yes? Is God the variable in all of this? J.I. Packer, wonderful theologian, I hope he's still alive, I don't know, he's old for sure. Wrote a book called Knowing God and many other books. Powerful, great, one sentence I struggle with. He said, when Jesus died, the Father switched his vote from no to yes. Sounds right. Thank you for the yes. What does that mean? Does that mean that when we sin, God switches from a yes to a no? Somewhere there's a no. That's not unconditional love anymore. But Hebrews 13:8 says Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever. So how can there be? Romans 8:38 and 39, nothing can separate us from the love of God. What about that? And if Jesus is the one who dies in order for God to switch his vote, then it looks like Jesus is already yes before God is yes. Is Jesus somehow more kind and more friendly and more on our side than the Father is? Well, that's wrong. The Bible says, I and the Father are one. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. You have to be careful with this. Or is God by default a no, then you have to persuade? If you're not careful, we get into the world of paganism, where you have to do certain things to persuade the gods to change your mind. When I first preached this, President Bush was the president. And he wanted to win some major congressional legislation. And someone somehow knew what he was doing in order to get the votes, calling people. One guy wanted to have a picture with him running, jogging with the president. So, okay, if you'll vote for me, I'll get up. Bush was calling people at 4 in the morning when he had time to call people. He called one guy who the father was retiring, and his son was going to run for the father's seat. And they said, we will pull all the money from your son's campaign unless you vote the right way on this. Is that what we have to do? Is God someone that we have to campaign for and somehow give him offerings, sacrifices, gifts, do something hard, do something in order to persuade God to be on our side? We give him a cross, give him Jesus, give him the blood of Jesus. I've been in India. They do a puja. I'm going here in a couple of weeks. Flowers and all kinds of offerings and sacrifices. I've seen them crawl on the floor. Every religion has some version of that. The gods are something that you have to persuade from no to yes. The question today is, when does God switch the vote? Easy answer would be at the second coming. I've got 5 C's here. When Jesus comes, be thou faithful unto death, and I will give you a crown of life. Behold, I'm coming soon, and my reward is with me. That's when God switches from no to yes. Or some could say maybe it's at the close of probation. Revelation 22:11, he who is righteous, righteous still, wicked, wicked still. Okay, God says that's it. Settled it. He hasn't actually come, but he's settled it. So that's the yes. Okay. Close of probation. Or is it at conversion? I was blessed when someone finally said, the moment you come to Christ, that's when you are converted and God says yes to you. You don't have to wait till the second coming. God already says yes. When you come to him, he says yes to you. Celebrate that. I felt that when I was converted. Or some would go even further and say it's at the cross. There were preachers all around in the 70s and 80s that I got a lot from, and they said, Jesus settled it at the cross. It is finished. You don't have to worry anymore. God has already expressed his heart to you in Jesus. And when Jesus paid the price, that's what Packer is saying. He went from no to yes. Jesus settled that with the Father. And he brought life to all men. Romans 5, John 1. These great verses. I was a young preacher. I preached all of that. God has already said yes to you at the cross. Not today, not this year. Back at the cross. Settled. It's a great blessing to me. But could it be we go back even farther to my 5th C? Not second coming, close of probation, conversion, cross. How about creation? 2 Timothy 1 verse 9. This grace which was given to you from before the foundation of time. Before the beginning of time. Grace means yes. If God gives you grace, then he says yes to you. He doesn't say yes to you at the cross or when you're converted or the second coming. He said yes to you from the very beginning. God is a yes God. And that's who he is. Jesus then changed God from a no to a yes. Jesus is God's revelation of his yes. But it's not what turned God into it. Grace is not something God learned over time. God is a yes kind of God. There's nothing you can do, you ever have to do to change the yes from God. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. God is a yes. 2 Corinthians 1 verse 20, all the promises are yes in Jesus Christ. God is a yes. If you don't know God as a yes, then I hope you will hear him as a yes. If all you've heard is Mount Sinai and shouting and thunder and lightning, and God is a judge and he's waiting to see if you make it to the end, get that one sin out, then you'll get the yes. Hear this. God is yes. Forever and ever, yes. I've used the safety deposit box in a bank. When I got to last year, I went down and bought a box, and I still have it now, 25 years later. It costs some money. But if all else goes crazy, I got a few things in there. I got the deed to the house and life insurance policies and a few things. And we have a key, and the bank has a key. And you go in and you fill out your name and a bunch of stuff, and then they take you back. And they take this big ring of keys, and the bank opens up their part. Then they reach out their hand, and I hand them my key. And then when my key goes, then it opens up. And I have said to many, many Bible studies, God has already turned the key. You don't have to wonder if he's going to turn the key or not. He's already done it. Back at the very beginning, God put you on his list. You didn't have to do anything to get on the list. That's where the default. That's where you start. You have to fight him off to get away from God. Safety deposit box. He already put your name in the book of life. He's already built a mansion. He prepared a place for you. God is always yes. If you want to go to heaven, the answer is yes. If you want to know if your sins are forgiven, the answer is yes. Does God want to bless you and answer your prayers? You don't have to persuade him, give him gifts, sacrifices, offer the cross to him. The answer is yes. It changes our religion from all the others. Don't let any trace of paganism come in. 2 Corinthians 1, 20, the promises of God are always yes in Jesus Christ. The cross did not turn God no into a yes. He was already yes. He did the cross because he is a yes, not in order to turn God into a yes. The moment Jesus died, the veil ripped from top to bottom. Not because now God was okay, but so that you could see inside and know that's who God was all along. The veil then ripped so that we could now, God could see us differently, so you and I could see God, see the truth about God, come boldly to the throne of grace. Where did we get this idea that God is a no? Maybe because when we pray, somehow the answer often seems to be no. We try so hard to get God to change his mind, get more people to pray, get bigger people to pray, better people to pray. Pastor Dan, I got 1,000 people praying. Everybody I know, all my face group, all my small group, everybody is praying, Pastor Dan, as if somehow God is a hard to get, a reluctant God, and you have to persuade him. Too bad. We had a big fire one time here in Southern California. We have them all the time, but there was this fire, I think 17 Adventist families' house burned down. One of our missionaries to Thailand, house burned down. Did God say no to them and yes to all the others? Paradise, our hospital is gone. People lost their practice. I read one yesterday. A friend of mine from Chicago has been a doctor in Paradise. Daughter just graduated from La Sierra University. Lost her house, lost her practice. No work for 6 months. I saw him at graduation. Tapped him on the shoulder. Remember me? Student missionary in Thailand. God chose no. Have to be careful. When Lazarus died, Jesus didn't go right away. Was that a no? Did God say no? I'll save other people. Went whole villages, saved everybody, left out Lazarus? No, the no was temporary. Once in a while there may be a temporary no. God is always yes. His heart is yes. The final answer is always yes. Julia Roberts, a famous movie called Runaway Bride. She runs away 3 times. And Richard Gere, here's a reporter, he hears about it, drives up to that city, interviews everybody, there's jokes, that she's a joke of the whole town, laughingstock. This girl that runs away on every wedding. And Richard Gere falls in love with her. Even though he knows this history, he says yes. She comes down the aisle. Is she going to say yes or no? And then she runs. down through the Sunday school rooms, out the window, jumps on a FedEx truck. And Richard Gere is in his tuxedo running after her. He's a yes. God is always running after us. Even though He knows who we are, He knows our history, He knows our fickleness, God is running after us. He's a yes. He will never give up. That's why they call the strange act at the end when He finally gives up, because it's so counter to His culture, His whole character and personality. Yes. Meryl Streep. I was watching when she was interviewed, in the Actors Studio show. And every show they ask this question: if you come to heaven and there is a God and there is a heaven, what do you hope you will hear? And Meryl Streep, just as quick as that, says, everybody in. Everybody in. God just says you're in. If you want to be in, you're in. Story I've told 1,000 times about the 4 guys in World War II. One died. They want to put him, buried him in the Catholic cemetery. He said, no, it's got to be for Catholic. They made him bury him outside the fence. Came back at the end of the war. They couldn't find his grave. They went to the priest, and they said, where did you put him? And he said, I'm so sorry. I should never have made you put him outside. So did you move him? No, I couldn't move him. I moved the fence. God is a God. If you want to be in, He's in. You're in. So look at this through the rest of the Bible. Stories that I have preached over the years. Put them all here in one place. Esther. Esther is scared to death to go in. Uncle says, go in before the king. No, I can't go in unless he extends the golden scepter to me. I will die. You go in. If you don't do it, God will send someone else. But maybe God has put you there for such a time as this. Okay. There comes that moment, she goes down the hallway to outside the door. And she goes in, and the king extends the scepter to her. We believe Jesus is the scepter. Genesis 49:10. Scepter shall not depart from Judah till Shiloh come. It's a scepter. You know, I don't have to worry. God has already said yes. God is a yes God. Ellen White heard that sermon and went forward and gave her life to Christ. The prodigal son was afraid that his father would not accept him. Maybe I can just be a servant, live on the servant's quarters and work on the farm, but at least be home. Better than what I have now. He goes home and the father comes running in, accepts him, bring the robe, bring the ring, bring the shoes. My son is home. Son doesn't have to do anything in order to persuade the father to accept him back. The father doesn't say, where's my money? He doesn't make him apologize. When he starts to talk, he said, don't want to hear it. Widow's name and funeral procession coming out. Jesus stops the procession. He doesn't ask for the boy's name. He doesn't ask for his life, his resume, his grade point average. He doesn't ask anything. Raises him back to life. Yes. Yes. David committed murder and adultery. If anybody ought to hear a no from God, it ought to be David. No. Prophet comes in, thou art the man. God accepts David. And God says to Solomon, why can't your heart be fully devoted to God as your father David was? God forget a few things. God was yes to David after murder and adultery. And Nathan says to David, 2 Samuel 12:13, the Lord has taken away your sin. Peter denies Jesus point blank when he said, I will never do that. Yes, you will. No, I won't. When the cock crows, you will deny me. And the cock crows, and Peter has to look up at Jesus and know that he had denied Jesus. And Desire of Ages says, when Peter looked at the faith of Jesus, he saw no anger there. Still yes. If anybody deserved to go from yes to no, it's Peter. No change. Woman caught in adultery. John chapter 8, Jesus says, neither do I condemn you. And in Matthew 8, a man comes to Jesus. And he says, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. He's a leper. He has leprosy. Leprosy was the worst. You were taken out from your community, from your family, from your work. You had to live out there. You had to go and cry out, unclean, unclean to everybody. Get a little food maybe from your family. Leprosy was terrible. I've been to the Father Damien Museum there in Hawaii, who went and embraced the lepers. And Jesus comes down and he touches the leper. And he says, I am willing. Be clean. If I am willing? Are you kidding? If I am willing? You're asking me if I am willing? He says, I am not like the other gods. I am always willing. You don't have to wonder about me anymore. And he heals him. If you are willing. There's no if with God. There's no more yes and no. It is yes from beginning to end. The same. Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, be clean. Jesus always takes the extremes and the worst. He takes a leper. And if you read the next few pages in that passage, the next one was a Gentile, a slave, then a woman, and two men possessed by demons. The Jews thought when God had his final great judgment, banquet feast, it would be only Jews. And what does Jesus say in Matthew 8:11? Many will come from east and west and north and south, and they will all eat at the banquet table. There will not be yes and no, Jews or someone else. People, some in and some out. They will all be yes. That's the gospel. There's no yes to some and no to others. Romans 11, verse 32, he will have mercy on all. We've used as our motto for a long time, grace everyone, everywhere, every time. God is always yes. And Christ is the ultimate proof. Jesus took every sin in the great Garden of Gethsemane. He felt as if he had committed every sin that you and I have ever committed, the worst sinner in the world. If anyone deserved to hear a no, it would be Jesus, because he was now taking it all. If God says no to sinners, then it's Jesus, his own son. And Desire of Ages says Christ has spent his whole life preaching to the world about God's love and mercy. And then there are two words, but now. And what do you expect to hear? He has been God's partner and friend. They've been one together forever. And Jesus has been preaching to everyone about God's love and mercy. But now that he's filled with sin, your sin and my sin, you expect the next sentence to be, but now he cannot. He's under the frown and the wrath of God. It's not what it says. Desire of Ages, page 753. But now, he cannot see the Father's reconciling face. Nothing has changed. Even though Jesus is the worst sinner in the history of the world, vicariously, he's taken all our sins. Nothing has changed in the heart of the Father. He cannot see it. Jesus can't feel the love and mercy from his Father. But nothing has changed. The Father is a yes. It's Jesus' capacity to feel the love of his Father that has changed. It is our experience. We are the variable, not God. God's heart is always the same yesterday, today, and forever. Sin doesn't change the heart of God. It just makes it so we can't hear the yes, but the yes was still there. Now the clearest passage, Matthew 5, 43 to 48. Where it says very clearly, don't just love your friends, your family, the people that are nice to you. Everyone does that. Love your enemies. And it says, Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Perfect in love. It's always yes. It's always yes. Can we be crystal clear? God's love is always the same. He's always yes. He is radically different from all the other gods and all the pagan religions. Nothing has to be done. He never switches from yes to no or from no to yes. He is forever, always a yes. There was a princess who somehow got lost walking away from home. For 10 years she was gone. No one knew where she was. The king sent out his number one servant, find her. Looked under the face of everyone. Walking down the road and looked across the way, and he looked at a lady who had a shawl. And something just told him, that's her. Went over there and looked at her and said, you're a princess. Took her a while for her to sort of admit it, to remember who she was. She'd kind of lost that, and took her home. She didn't have to do anything to become the princess. She didn't have to do something to get back in with the king. The king, all she had to do was become aware of who she always was, the princess. You and I don't have to do anything to get God to accept us back as a prince or princess. We just have to become aware again of who we are. This changes the idea of the judgment. You don't have to worry about the judgment at the end of the world. God is yes. If you want to be in, the answer is yes. Intercession, you don't have to get someone to intercede with you between you and God to somehow get God to choose. If you can't get God to do it, then get Mary to speak for you, or Jesus, or one of the saints, or give him offerings. You don't have to do that. It changes our understanding of the cross. The cross is not to change God from no to yes. The cross is to show us the yes of God. Prayer is not to change the heart and mind of God. Somehow get bigger, broader, smarter, better people. Jesus says in John 5, my Father is always working, and I too am always working. Always. Prayer gets us aligned with his yes. We can cooperate with his yes, receive his yes, hear his yes. Prayer is when we dial in so that we can feel the yes of God, but it doesn't change the heart of God. If I can just say carefully, you grow up and you hear about sexuality, but everyone tells you, no, you can't. No. Everyone tells you no. Church says no. Everyone says no. Until you get married. And finally, you get to walk into a hotel and someone says yes to you. And God wants to say to all of us, yes, yes.